What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Carvalho Creations, where I show you how to make awesome props and projects of your own. If you guys are new to the channel, my name is Carvalho, and I'm a super creative dude that loves to make the creepiest of creations, and of course, bring you guys along for the ride. So in today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to take a 12-gallon tub, some cement, and expanding foam, and turn it into this wicked cauldron with this disgusting brew. So if you guys want to see how we do it this week, get ready to get inspired, because we're about to go wild. All right, what's up, everybody? So today we're going to be making an oversized cauldron, kind of spilling with everything coming out of it. But before we actually get to the material list, I wanted to talk about the design a little bit. Now, the other day I was sitting down and I was trying to brainstorm an idea for this prop today, so I can bring you a good, fulfilling tutorial with as many tips and tricks as I can push in there. So as I was thinking, I figured I didn't want to have a traditional standing cauldron like you see, either hanging from a chain or whatnot. I wanted it to be spilled over and then have like the potion or brew kind of cascading out of this, and then put like body parts in it, maybe some tentacles, something trippy to give it a really cool effect. And then at the back end of it, I wanted to drill a hole in the bottom so I can put a fog machine in there to create that look and give it more of an ambiance. So now let's get to the material list so you know what you're going to need to get this prop going. So first and foremost, we're going to be using a 12-gallon. This is basically like a big pail. And I'm sure you've seen this in a lot of other YouTube videos because a ton of people have done it. I'm going to be using cardboard to create the ridges around this bucket to turn it into a cauldron. And then we'll be wrapping that with cement. So we're definitely going to need cement in this and some fabric to get this going. We're going to be using some spray foam to create the cascading like slime potion brew spilling out of it. And then I'm going to be repurposing one of my old zombie heads that I created for my airbrush tutorial. It's kind of just been sitting around, so I want to repurpose that for a prop, so I thought it'd be perfect for this. We're also going to be using like a Dollar Tree plastic hand and arm to create a little bit more character to the actual prop itself. And for the ridges on the cardboard to create that look, one thing I really don't like is a lot of the projects and props that I've seen, you can see the ridges through their covering, their hard coating, and it just takes away from the look of it. So to kind of combat that a little bit, we're going to be using some plastic trash bags and just kind of filling in between those cardboard pieces, and then probably laying over a little bit of upholstery foam over the top of that, just to create a barrier between the cardboard ridges and the outside hard coating. So this is going to be a really cool build. I'm super excited about this. We're going to have a little bit of effect with it. It's going to be something fun that most of you are going to be able to do no problem with things that you can find at your local hardware store. So I hope you guys are excited about today's build. I certainly am. So without any further ado, why don't we go ahead and go wild. All right, to start off our armature today, I'm just going to be taking my cardboard here and I'm leaning up it against the bucket so I can create a shape that I think is going to work for our cauldron. And then I'm just going to cut this piece out and then use that as a template to cut out more pieces of this, because I want them to go all the way around this bucket here. Now, at the end of everything, I think I cut about 16 pieces and I spaced them about 4 to 6 inches apart from each other just to make sure I created that shape and it was cohesive all the way around the piece. So when I went to go fill it in, there was no gaps or dips in anything. This is probably the most tedious part of the entire build, was cutting that as well. And when I went to go put this on, I considered using tape, like just regular duct tape for this, but I thought hot glue was going to be the best bet just because it creates a stronger bond and then those cardboard pieces are more rigid. If I use tape, there's a tendency to flop around and I didn't want that. So hot glue, even though it took a little bit longer, it's more tedious, was the better bet for this. And because I want this cauldron to be sitting on its side, I'm taking the one side here and just cutting down those pieces flat so I have something to sit this over on top of and it'll sit flush on that ground there. And now I'm just going to take some packing tape here and my trash bags, and I'm going to go ahead and fill in between these pieces of cardboard here so I don't see those ridges in my end result. And then just to hold them in place, I'll be taking the packing tape here and just taping right over the top here. Now, I'm not worried about getting full coverage in this step. I just want to make sure that that material stays in place and also I retain that original shape that I was going for.
I also made sure to mark the flat area so I knew where to leave it. And now, like I said, just to create an extra layer between that cardboard so I do not see the ridges in my end result, I'm just taking some spray adhesive here and wrapping my scrap upholstery foam, making sure to tuck it under the lip so it looks good in the end and I retain that shape that I started with.
All right, everybody, so I wanted to stop real quick because we're just about done with our armature for our cauldron. You guys can see how it looks now. And I put the upholstery foam all around everything we built as far as covering the bags and the cardboard so we can cover up those ridges so I don't see them when I put my cement over the top of here. But we're just about ready for the cement now. I'm going to go ahead. I already cut up my pieces. I cut up over what I needed. I wanted to stress how important that is because when it comes to monster mudding, when it comes to doing your cement, if you guys cut what you think is enough and it turns out not to be enough, you got to stop your entire process, take all the gloves off, get everything cleaned, recut new material to get back to work. So it's going to save you a lot of time to cut over what you think you need before you actually get to your monster mud or your cement stage. So we're just about ready though. So I'm going to go ahead and mix up my batch of cement and then we'll get to applying it to our armature. So why don't we go ahead and do that?
Now to start my cement process, I'm taking my 5-gallon bucket and just some water here, and I'm probably using maybe a half a gallon of water and then mixing in some of this cement here. Now I want to mention I did my mixture a little bit thin. You want yours to be more of a consistency of like runny pancake batter, maybe even a little bit thicker than that. But here, to help my cement and fabric stick to the armature, I'm just grabbing handfuls of that cement slurry and just kind of smearing it over the top here. Take your time with this part too, because you really want to hide those seams as much as possible so this feels like one cohesive piece. You don't want it to feel like a bunch of material wrapped around something. So take your time, make sure you smooth out those seams. And also too, I go a step further here and I mixed up a little thicker of that cement slurry, and right here at the seam, I'm just taking handfuls of it and just kind of smearing and blending away that crease.
All right, guys, so I wanted to stop the video just to give you a little tip and trick for something that I want to implement in today's project. So because we're making the cauldron with the brew spilling out, I wanted to put little things in there. Like I'm going to put my head in there and definitely an arm, something like that. But I want to put eyeballs in there. Now, I have these eyeballs, so hopefully you guys can see that. These are the cheap Dollar Tree ones that they look pretty funky, kind of crappy. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to use some of my doll eyes because these are a lot more realistic looking. And I'll leave a link down in the description for my associates program down below so you can pick these up on Amazon for yourself if you want to use them for your props. But these are too small, obviously. I want them to be this size, but I want the iris of this to sit here. So what I'm going to be doing is removing this iris, taking this stuff off, and then gluing this here. And then as an added trick, and I saw this somewhere online, I think it was on Pinterest. I can't remember the original creator, but if I do find it, I'll link it in the description down below. I'm going to take a little bit of this yarn here and some polyurethane. This is clear polyurethane, a gloss. And I'll be applying that to our eye to create the veinage you see on this cheap one here, but make it look more realistic. So this is going to be like a little sub-tutorial within this tutorial today. So to get this off, if you guys are curious about how to get this paint off this plastic so you don't have this, because the other side has writing on it, I'm just going to be using a little bit of acetone and a rag, and just get yourself a little bit on there. And then just start to wipe away, and you can see this comes right off. Just wipe away that color. And now we got a pretty clear, clean eye. So that's what we're looking for. So I'm going to go ahead now and use my heat gun to remove this iris here. So what I do is I'll just put the iris right in to my pliers here so I'm not cooking myself. Get a flathead screwdriver right there. And then I'll just start applying some heat to this eye. So it doesn't take very long, but what you're looking for is this plastic is super soft, and then you can start to see the edge of this here. So I'm just going to work this iris out now, and it should pop out relatively easily. Okay, so I don't know if you're going to be able to see that on camera, but I did pop the iris out there. And now I'm just going to take a little bit of hot glue on the back of this iris here, just to stick it to my new eyeball.
Now, the iris is still a little bit small, but that's okay. I think it's going to work out pretty well for this prop here. This is going to be like a side angle of it. And then to create the veinage that you see in the eye here, I'm going to be taking just a little bit of this yarn. So I'll go ahead and snip this. All right. And the idea here is to kind of fray the edge. Now, I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see this too well, but I want all those little fibers to become super frizzed, basically. So I'm just pulling it apart with my fingers until I get these all separated, or as much as possible here. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see a little bit of that. Just take your time with it too. This is honestly the first time I'm giving this a go, to be honest with you, so I'm sure I'll get it down a little bit easier. But so I'll take my eye and I'm just gonna dip my brush in the polyurethane here to get a nice little sticky coating to go around the edges here. And then I'm going to start applying my yarn to the side, get a little bit more polyurethane, and then just kind of brush it into place. Hopefully you guys can see this on camera, but that creates such a cool and trippy looking eye. So I'm going to do the rest of this eyeball and a few more for this project. And this is going to be a really cool addition and something very easily that you guys can do at home to create better props, to make things look more realistic. And how cool is that? So I'm going to go ahead and finish these up. We're going to put a bunch of them on top of our cauldron, in the goo, in the brew as we make it, and just add a little bit more effect. But let's get back to that build.
So I wanted to add a tentacle in this, so I'm just taking, I believe this is 11 or 8 gauge wire. Now it doesn't really matter, but I just wanted a thicker wire to make sure that this holds the shape that I was going for. So in order to hold this pool noodle on the wire here, I'm just going to go ahead and duct tape it in place just to hold the wire. And then I'm just bending it by hand to create like an S shape so it looks more like a tentacle. And then to fill in the top portion, just taking more of that plastic bag there and then wrapping some tape around it just to create that top point of the tentacle. Now to coat this thing and hard coat it, I'm actually going to be using Monster Mud as opposed to our cement. I felt like the Monster Mud dries a little harder and I needed this to be a little more stiff. So I'm just going to wrap this in some Monster Mud with some scrap fabric I had, but that worked out perfectly.
All right, guys, so now that our cement is all dry, what I ended up doing, because the cement was a little thin, so I want to make sure that you guys understand when you're using your cement, make sure you get a nice slurry going. So you want something like equivalent to like pancake batter, loose pancake batter. If you're able to get it to that consistency, your material is going to soak up the cement really well and it's going to hold to your structure. For me, I went a little too thin, so this stuff is not as hard as I would like. So what I ended up doing was taking handfuls of Monster Mud and kind of just globbing it over the top of it to create a harder coat than what I got with the cement. So just make sure you have a nice thick slurry when you do yours so you don't have that issue. But now this is all dry. It's been sitting out in 100-degree weather for the last couple of days. Super nice. So I'm going to lay this down now. And to start to create the look of the brew spilling out, I don't want it to be stuck to the cauldron, so I have to have it in this position always. I want to be able to stand this bad boy up if I want to use it for another decoration down the line. So I'm going to be using a piece of cardboard here, cut out to the shape I want. And it's basically going to allow me to spray my foam over the top of this so I can remove the cardboard and remove the brew when I feel fit to use it for a different prop in a different way. So first thing we're going to do is start with our foam. So I'll put it in place and spray it. Once that's nice and dry, I'll make sure to stick my props inside. Also too, I did make a little makeshift like tentacle that I'm going to have coming out. Like I said, we're going to have the eyes in this. We're going to have the head and a plastic hand that I'm probably going to manipulate with a little bit of heat because it's one of these deals and this looks a little junky. I want the wrist bent. I want the fingers kind of curled. So I'm going to use my heat gun to kind of bend this into position. And then we'll stick these into the foam as it cures. Once that's done, we'll give everything a nice black base coat. And then we'll start doing our detailed paint. And because we use Monster Mud and cement for our cauldron, it has this nice like gritty texture to it. So it's going to look great. It's going to look like rust. It's going to look like old cast iron that's been sitting for a long time. I'll probably add a little bit of moss, Dollar Tree moss, just to give it some effect, and then we'll add our fog machine to the back. But this is going to be really awesome. So why don't we go ahead and get to that next step?
All right, to create our spilled potion here, I'm just taking a piece of cardboard and creating like a design to make it look like it's spilled. And then, like I said, I'm going to be bending up my plastic hand here, and heat and a little bit of water works perfectly for this. Now, either use gloves or use a tabletop space to bend your fingers so it's a lot safer for you. And for the handles of the cauldron, I just picked up these. These are old things I've had from the Dollar Tree for years. They're just old shackles, and I thought they would be perfect for the handles. So I'm just repurposing these, and then I'll be hot gluing these to the side of the cauldron. Now I want to mention the cauldron's pretty dusty from the cement, so make sure you're pretty generous with that hot glue so these handles stay in place. Don't worry about over gluing them as well, because if anything, that just looks like old welding. Now here, I'm just putting a layer down of my spray foam so I cover the cardboard completely. I used about maybe a can and a half for this project, if you guys were wondering. And now I'm just going to set in my props here. Now the tentacle is a little heavy, so I leaned it up against the cauldron, but the other props were no problem. I set them in to make it look like they were kind of flowing out and kind of reaching forward to make it more interesting. And then I took a little bit more foam and just sprayed around the props so they stick in place and hold really well. Now I'm just kind of placing my eyes where I feel like they would work and look the best. And again, to create a little hole in the bottom of my cauldron, I'm using a 3/4 inch Forstner bit here. Now, in hindsight, I'd probably make that hole a little bit bigger just so it lets in more fog, but it still worked out pretty nicely. And again, I'm just going to be coating this with the black paint like I do with most of my props. I feel like it just works out better if everything is base coated in black. And I had the idea originally to hit this thing with some black light, so I used fluorescent paint as a base coat for my slime. I didn't end up using the black light, but it's still going to be an option if I decide to do that later on down the line. But it did work out as a really nice deep green coat. And here to create more of a rust look, I used 3 different colors here. This is like a rust, a tan, and a deep brown color. And I just kind of let them mix on the sponge that I'm using and stipple them on top of the cauldron to create this rusted old antiquing effect. It's a really great way, and because we use monster mud and cement here, it created such a gritty texture that it just looks amazing at the end. I wasn't happy with just this rust though. I wanted to go back in with like a little more green here, so I used a light green and like a medium tone green just to create like this cauldron had been used by a witch for years and years, and there's tons of old potion and goo just kind of slimed along the side. This was a perfect way to get this done. Now for the slime, I decided to go back with a little bit of a lighter color green just to highlight that stuff. So there's variations in color there, and it just creates another level of detail, another layer. Now for the tentacle here, I thought it'd be cool to get like a pop of color, and this like pink purple color was the best. And then to highlight those actual suckers, I just used like a pearl color and just kind of used my airbrush to really highlight those. And once that was finished, it brought so much character to the piece. So I'm so happy I did this tentacle for that. If you guys want to see me make a full-size tentacle, maybe for like a pirate prop or something like that, let me know down in the comment section below. Now for my zombie head and arm, I wanted this to look more rotten. So I went with like a brown color for the base tone for the skin of this. And then I'm going to go back here and hand paint in the teeth with a little brighter color. Now I want to mention with your detail paint, what really makes these things work out is the contrast you give them, especially if they're going to be in low light. So you want to give deeper colors next to brighter colors. It just helps to pop these things out and make them more visibly appealing and aesthetically appealing for your audience. And to create the gums here, because I didn't want just white and brown, I'm going to be using like a reddish color here just to kind of give that illusion of rotten flesh. So I use that in the teeth and the gums, around the eyes and the nose a little bit, and then also around the skull where it's more exposed. And here again, I'm just painting on what like a bone color and then I'll go back in with a little bit of that same red for the gums around the edges here to make it look like there was blood attached to the skull and the skin. Just finishing up the arm here, and then I'm going to add a little bit of speckle, like green splatter, like potion splatter, but this prop is pretty much done. I hope you guys liked today's build. If you did, if you want to see more Halloween props, make sure you're subscribed down below. But until next time, happy haunting.
Well, there you have it. A magical mess straight out of a witch's living room. If today's Cauldron prop brought you a little bit of spooky inspiration, smash that like button like it's crawling with spiders. Make sure you're subscribed down below and conjure up a comment to let me know what kind of spooky props you guys want to see next. Because remember, I read all the comments, even the weird ones.
Especially the weird ones.
But until next time, keep building things, stay creative, and don't forget to go wild. I'm Gio from Carvalho Creations, and I'll see you next time. Ooh, look, my hand. Oh God!